minute and show you this, this template. And what I wanted to show you is I just took a piece of plywood and ripped it to 1 5/8. And what I tried to get, if you want to feel there, it's very close to what this is. So the objective, if you all want, come and use this when you're taking your legs down, and it should be real close. Now on a template like this, I try to make sure I make it the right size, or just a tiny bit large. I make sure I don't get it small. And when I made this, I just laid it on a table and started at a 1/2 inch, and then a inch and an inch and a half. So this is 1 5/8.
Drew your own graph paper.
Yeah, I made my own graph paper and then did the little cross hatching. And then I looked on the drawing. Can I borrow your drawing? And counted down the squares, and I got to about, and there is no right and wrong in this about, if you said, well, it should be 5 or it should be 6 or whatever, I wouldn't argue with you. But I counted down and said, okay, 6 1/2, and I made my mark. And then I counted up to where I thought the flat part was. Where the what do you call it, the apex of the radius, or right there. I said, okay, that's where the flat part is. And then I did the same on the back. And then, have you seen the trick where you take the plywood and bend it to make your, all right, so it's, and if you notice here, he shows this as almost a straight line. And I didn't like that, so I made a curve out of it. And so what we wind up with, and he says that he uses chalk to make his. I used a pencil, which means we'll have to have a good light.
Chalk is just it's too thick.
Yeah, it's just a blunt instrument. So
They sell white pencils at Woodcraft.
really,
Yeah.
amazing.
I wonder what they're for.
And then just make your mark on it. So after that, you saw where I picked my surfaces, and I said, okay, this is I want to see that when I walk into the room. And once I pick the face, it's going to go on one of the corners. So obviously this and this are the side grain, and that's the back, once I've made that decision. So I also made this, and that's for the dovetail that joins these two legs together in the front. Yeah, here, right there. And I went ahead and made it full length. So you can use it not only to lay out your dovetail, but just to double check your length. It's a kind of a goof-proof way of making sure that when you cut your stock, you cut it to the right length and then lay it out. So you can lay this, you can use this to lay out your dovetail. Once you do this for the piece that actually goes on your frame, then you don't want to lay this aside and use your piece to lay out the female part of the dovetail, and we'll do that. I got one other thing to show you. I use pencil marks to lay out a lot of stuff, but when it comes to something like this, I almost always use an X-Acto, because, and we'll probably see this later, but if you make a mark with an X-Acto like that, and you use a chisel, the chisel will find that mark, or find that depression, and it makes all the difference in the world on dovetails. And then the last thing is when we cut these dovetails here, what we'll do is use that drill press. I don't know, have you ever used a drill press for dovetails?
Dovetails?
Yeah.
No.
You're making this up.
The next thing you can tell is you can use a circular saw.
You can, well, you can always use a router. It's almost as, so when we cut
That's against
this,
Ray's rules to use even the
That's
drill
right.
press. Yeah.
so when you cut that dovetail, one of the things that you want is a vertical wall, right? Well, if you take and lay the dovetail out, now when I take my, I can't do it from this side, but I can from this side. I would lay this piece down, and with a Forstner bit, like a 3/8" Forstner, I can go in here and I can plunge all the way down to the depth. And back here I can go all the way down to the depth. So I have two things there, a vertical wall, and I have my depth at almost an exact, now you can,
Two reference points.
yeah, yes, you have two reference points, and even though that thing has a tiny spur on it that's gonna make a little dimple, it's not gonna matter, it's not gonna show, and it won't affect the joint. But where we lay that out, we'll make that mark with the, and then we'll take our chisel, and you're then chiseling on straight grain wood, and it will just peel right out. I mean, it'll just, and then you'll have a nice flat wall. And this joint is critical, because you're gonna want, I probably, when I made this template, I may have made this not as wide as I could have. And the reason is because we don't want to blow out that wall or that wall, because if the fit is not perfect, the tendency will be to blow out that wall. And depending on how much work you do, most dovetails are either 1:8 or 1:6. You know what that means? All right, so on hardwood, typically use 1:8. On softwoods, use 1:6. This is a little more aggressive, and so I used the 1:8 on this. But I also used it because I didn't want this thing to come out close to that wall right there. Stay away.
And this
from
little
it.
notch is because of that lap joint?
Yep, or the tenon. Yeah,
Tenon,
there's a
yeah.
tenon
So-
coming in there
yeah.
that you want to stay away from. Yeah. So if we get to this today, then the other thing we got to decide is, I always use a slot mortiser for making these, but we don't have a slot mortise to do. So if we get close to that today, we'll take that Powermatic and use that for doing the mortises, all on the sides and the, okay. All right, and by the way,
I remember that tool.
these are wonderful.
I have
What, a
100 hours with that tool.
Is that a scalpel?
It's a scalpel,
is.
yeah. And the nice thing about it is you can reach into tiny places and where you're trying to do dovetails. The only problem you get is that you get that
A little wobbly.
with it. So you almost have to make your fingers rigid, because if you go in there like this, you'll do that, but if you kind of, and you have to angle it slightly. It's a little harder to use, but in some places there's almost nothing.
It's also about 10 times sharper than that
Oh, yeah.
X-Acto knife.
Yeah.
Ask me how I know that.
You can attest.
Yes, I can. I got a few bellflowers that can attest to
Is
it.
that one of those you don't test it?
Yeah, yeah, let me see how.
Where do you
sharp
get
that is.
replacement blades for that scalpel? I still have the pack from that class, but I'm gonna use them up someday.
Go down to Brookwood and see.
You can get them on eBay.
Okay.
If you get a replacement, or at least you could.
Yeah.
This is a French.
I mean, I got 4 doctors in the class. 2 of them are surgeons. I'm sure I could get them if I had to.
Yeah, I said this is French. That must be a city in France, Pakistan.
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 That's it.
All right.
Pakistan.
Okay, so the next thing we'll do with this is we'll make a jig that we'll use these with, and whoever's ahead or is interested and wants to make a jig can help do this. But we'll make a jig and use this to cut the front or the side off the jig. And then we'll mount our legs in there. After we bandsaw that waist, we'll then place it on there, clamp it down, and that's what you run through the router. So your hands stay away, there's no risk, and you get, and if anyone wants, go make your own. If you take that plan, if you want to do it as an exercise, or if you would like a different shape, then by all means, do that. But you're welcome to use this. The nice thing about this is that everybody should be the same. Make sure though that you get the dimension pretty close. And then if you're off slightly, it will then become important that when you lay them on here, you don't do one to the front and one to the back, that you do them consistently. That's the thing you'll be looking for, is consistency. Okay, any questions on that?
I have a different question.
Yeah.
I saw on the plans that we're gonna have quarter-inch maple from the door bottom.
Yeah.
Are we doing plywood, or are we gonna